Welcome to the FECFile tutorial series on reporting independent expenditures. In this video, I will talk about the two types of independent expenditure filers. This will help ensure that you are watching the correct video series later on and are filing the correct reports. I will also review some of the requirements for reporting independent expenditures. The rest of the videos in this series will show you how to use FECFile for these reports. If you know which series you'd like to watch, please click on the links in the section below. Let's start with a formal definition. An independent expenditure is an expenditure for a communication expressly advocating the election or defeat of a clearly identified candidate that is not made in cooperation, consultation, or concert with, or at the request or suggestion of, a candidate's authorized committee, or their agents, or a political party or its agents. There are two major types of entities that make independent expenditures and file with the Commission: political committees and any other person. These two types of filers receive different identification numbers from the Commission, file on different forms, and are governed by different sections of the regulations, so it is incredibly important for you to know which type of entity you are. The first type is a political committee. This is a committee registered with the FEC, such as a political action committee or party committee. These committees file a statement of organization, are given a C00 ID number, file on the Form 3X and Schedule E, and their independent expenditure reporting requirements are listed in part under Section 104.4 of the FEC's regulations. The second filer type is any person other than a political committee. This type includes individuals, partnerships, corporations, labor organizations, or groups of individuals. These filers do not file a statement of organization, are given a C9 ID number, file on the Form 5, and their independent expenditure reporting requirements are listed in sections 109.10 and 11 of the FEC's regulations. Because of the different ID numbers, reporting forms, and governing regulations, it's important to know what type of IE filer you are and file with the correct forms from the very beginning. Next, I'll cover reporting requirements. Whether you are a political committee or in the any other person category, you are required to file reports of independent expenditures. Political committees will include independent expenditures on the regularly scheduled Form 3X. For any independent expenditure paid to a vendor or other person that exceeds $200 with respect to a particular election, you'll need to include this activity on Schedule E. In addition to these filings, 24 and 48-hour reports may be required. We'll cover that later in this video. Filers that fall into the any other person category are required to file reports of independent expenditures on the Form 5. These reports must be filed at the end of the first quarterly reporting period in which independent expenditures for a particular election aggregate more than $250 in a calendar year. You also have to file in any following quarterly reporting period in that same year in which any additional independent expenditures are made. In addition to these filings, 24 and 48-hour reports may be required. We'll cover that later in this video. In addition to regularly scheduled reports, you may be required to disclose your activity on time-sensitive reports. These 24 and 48-hour reports are considered standalone reports. These are filed separately and in addition to your regularly scheduled reports. Earlier in the election cycle, you will file 48-hour reports. Closer to the election, you'll be in a 24-hour reporting period. The FEC has election-specific reporting dates available for you on its website. You can find the link below. We'll go into specifics in just a minute. There are two factors that will help you determine if and when to file a time-sensitive report: the dissemination date of the independent expenditure and the amount of the independent expenditure. The first factor, the dissemination date, is the date when the communication is publicly distributed or otherwise publicly disseminated. The second factor that determines whether you need to file a 24 or 48-hour report is the amount of the independent expenditure. To calculate this amount, you need to aggregate based on total spent per calendar year, election, and office sought. This means that all independent expenditures are combined if they are supporting or opposing candidates in the same election in a calendar year. For example, if a filer makes a $10,000 independent expenditure to support a candidate in California's 1st Congressional District primary election, and then later that year spends $12,000 to oppose a different candidate in the same congressional district, the filer's aggregate total for that election is $22,000. Let's move on to the specific requirements for 48-hour reports. Both political committees and the Any Other Filer group are required to file a 48-hour report once your aggregate independent expenditures during a calendar year reach or exceed $10,000. As a reminder, this aggregate is calculated on a per calendar year, per election, per office sought basis. The 48-hour reporting period covers any independent expenditure disseminated or publicly distributed at any time up to and including the 20th day before an election. Here we've highlighted the two factors for whether you'll need to file a 48-hour report: amount and dissemination date. The 48-hour independent expenditure report must be filed with and received by the Commission by the end of the second calendar day after the independent expenditure communication is publicly disseminated, which is why they're called 48-hour reports. These reports must include all independent expenditures with respect to that election that have not yet previously been disclosed. As states establish their election schedules, the Commission calculates the applicable 24 and 48-hour report periods. Don't worry about having to memorize these dates. The Commission keeps a list of the dates for each election on the FEC website under the Help with Reporting and Compliance tab. Additional 48-hour reports are required for subsequent independent expenditures related to the same election that aggregate $10,000 or more through the 20th day before the election. As an election approaches, the dollar threshold and the reporting time period changes for filing time-sensitive reports. Both political committees and the Any Other Filer group are required to file 24-hour reports once your aggregate independent expenditures reach or exceed $1,000 with respect to a given election. As a reminder, this aggregate is calculated on a per calendar year, per election, per office sought basis. The 24-hour reporting period covers any independent expenditure disseminated or publicly distributed fewer than 20 days, but more than 24 hours before an election. The independent expenditure must be reported to and received by the FEC within 24 hours of the time the communication is publicly distributed or otherwise publicly disseminated. These reports must include all independent expenditures with respect to that election that have not yet been previously disclosed. You can find the 24-hour reporting timeframes on the FEC website. Additional 24-hour reports are required for subsequent independent expenditures related to the same election that aggregate $1,000 or more, fewer than 20 days but more than 24 hours before an election. The next videos in this series will show you how to report independent expenditures as well as file the 24 and 48-hour reports. We have two different tracks of videos, depending on which type of filer you are. If you're a political committee, continue watching the Independent Expenditures for Political Committees series, or RAD track. If you are a filer that falls under the Any Other Person category, continue watching the Independent Expenditures for Filers series, or Blue track. Thanks for watching.